Hi, Jennifer Benoken with DuPont Tyvek Medical Packaging. I'm here today with Steve Pepe from Oliver Healthcare Packaging. He is the Vice President of Global Marketing, and we're here to talk today about some of the things going on right now at Oliver. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Fun times in the pandemic, as we've been discussing, and that hopefully, some of the things that we bring about today will be enlightening and uplifting for people. So, want to dig right in?
Sure, let's go.
Excellent. So my first question for you is, what is Oliver's current strategy from a business standpoint? You just acquired a design company.
hmm
I'd love to have you, explain a little bit about that, what your plans are for that, any other plans you have, et cetera. So all you.
Sure. Thanks again for having me, though, Jen. And it's really just good to connect and talk with you during what's been a truly crazy year, right? I think 2020 tested us professionally, personally, in ways we probably never imagined. But for Oliver, it's been a really interesting year of trying to be reactive to customers' needs throughout COVID, trying to continue to play the long game for what we think the industry is going to need for packaging solutions. We're purely focused on medical. It's long been part of our strategy and will remain part of our strategy. We think that's a real differentiator for us. And this year we made a move to acquire a company called Kansas City Design. Kansas City Design, or KCD for short, was very focused on pharmaceutical and biologics, right? So whereas Oliver's expertise has typically been in the medical device space and flexible packaging, KCD's was more on new product development, packaging to serve those markets. And we're just excited to bring them on board and really double down on design. I think design has the chance to be a core competency for us, something that more and more companies will be looking for, help solving like the hardest design challenges, especially in the world of drug delivery. Those biologics have, temperature needs, humidity needs, transportation needs that old packaging design might not have solved. So you're running up against vaccines and other drugs with really creative challenges to overcome, and you need very talented designers to do that. And we think that's what this new division will really bring to us. So we've renamed that group to Oliver Design, and we'll be looking to really grow, expand, invest in that group to do some additional capabilities and add a lot of design into the company where we already think we're strong, but kind of adding to that core competency.
Excellent. So already people can contact you for design assistance and you'll get them linked with the correct people internally now.
Yeah, exactly. So the head of that group is Mark Foster, who's been with Oliver for a while and has kind of been promoted to run that acquisition. So Mark is out there talking with different customers. He's a great point of contact for folks who want to learn more about this new capability, without going into my sales pitch too much. But I just think design is something that everyone appreciates if it helps you solve a problem. Not designed for design's sake, just to make something look fancy, but help me solve a problem, help me do it faster, help me do it more affordably, maybe do it at scale. And that's part of the capability we're really looking forward to adding to the company.
Absolutely, which kind of leads into our next question, design for manufacturing. And beyond, really. You want to talk a little bit about that and what the plans are and your thoughts are around that?
Yeah, this is, I think this is a really interesting topic because, so Oliver, we have a customer advisory board who we've met with a few times. And one of the topics that was hot on their minds last year was sustainability. So what's going to happen to packaging downstream after its intended use? So it's been opened in the operating room and used, but then the disposal and the recycling, and some of the larger customers and the European customers were very interested in that angle. So we did a lot of deep diving into sustainability and the end of life and realized that you can design for that outcome if that's what's important to the customer. And then with Oliver Design, our new pharma wing, right, we've noticed designing for manufacturing is very important there. You can come up with a great, important, beautiful design that looks great on paper, but then no one can actually build it, or it's too hard. When you get to the actual production process, it fails and never passes testing and never makes it off the shelf. So you've almost got like a triangle of designing for end of life and a sustainability outcome, designing for manufacturing, which is giving me a good, solid design that's going to pass testing and work. And then the third angle would be designing for use, which I think is the most important, is can the nurse, the doctor, the person who's intended, can they understand it? Does it solve their problem? If it doesn't work in the operating room, then it doesn't work, period. So designing for end of life, manufacturing, and use are three great outcomes. It's kind of a design triangle, if you will, that I just think is an
Absolutely.
interesting paradigm.
And you can't really separate them from each other either. I mean, even when you talk about design for use and design for manufacturing, there's a union there in design for use isn't necessarily just for the end user.
Yep,
It's for the manufacturing people using it to get it packaged in the first place.
that's right.
It has to be usable for them to get it through the manufacturing process. So it's not just the design that needs to like work with the manufacturing process. It needs to work with the people working the process as well.
Exactly. They all have to work together. And I think
Yep.
that's one of the things I enjoy about working at Oliver is because we're only focused on medical, right? We can really dig into those challenges. So we've done OR simulations, we've done observations, we've tried to really talk to as many packaging engineers as we can, nurses, doctors, understand how things actually get used,
Hmm.
and then make sure those insights filter into our designs, into our manufacturing, into our testing, right? Great design has to pull all the way through and get used correctly to solve the problem. So it's one of the fun parts of design.
Completely agree. Now, you've talked a couple of times about being focused on medical, but I know that you also focus on pharmaceutical.
Hmm.
And I know that you guys have a pretty good handle on what's going on in the pharmaceutical space. Can you talk a little bit about that? You've touched on the whole concept of
Sure.
drug delivery and how that's changing a little bit with what we're going through right now. Tell me all you want to tell me about pharmaceutical with respect to itself, as well as compared to MDM or medical device manufacturing. Tell me
Yeah.
all you know.
So we've been using the term drug delivery more because I think sometimes pharmaceutical gets narrowed to just oral dose tablet,
Hmm.
right? And those needs have kind of been well established for a few decades and, have their improvements. But more and more the drug format is changing from oral dose to liquid drug, administered through syringe. And those bring a whole set of new challenges, right? So pre-filled syringe tubs and how they get cleanly manufactured and transported and filled. And then finished drugs, how they get packaged and shipped to their end use. Perhaps they need cold chain for the entire distance. Perhaps they have, a tighter transportation testing requirement because it's a really sensitive drug. And the worst outcome is the drug arrives and it's cloudy, it's been compromised, and now that life-saving therapy can't be used.
Sure, sure.
So I just think the packaging challenges are much greater in the drug delivery world than maybe what we've anticipated. So part of like continuing try to add to our insights there, working with you guys on research, getting out and talking to more and more drug delivery companies. We service quite a few at Oliver, so it's about learning their needs, getting better at it. One of the learnings we had was speed. If you really want
Hmm.
to help me in this space, you got to be fast because
Yes.
I might get my PDUFA date, right? Notification quickly, and I need you to move right away. And I
Yeah.
need you to produce, really small font packaging in 7 languages, and I need you to do it, in 48 hours. So we had to become more nimble,
Yep.
and that's one of the reasons we, made the acquisition. Oliver Design is they also have small scale production capabilities.
Which
So
is
it's not,
often the case in some case, in many cases, with the initial onset or release of a pharmaceutical.
that's right. Yeah. So it's like they need 5,000, in a week because, we just got our clearance and we need to get our first batch out, and having small scale production right next to the designers is critical. It allows us to meet that need of speed that the
Hmm.
drug delivery market really wants. So that's the biggest change I've noticed between medical device and drug delivery is just the sheer speed needed on the one side sometimes can be that much more urgent.
Sure, and which part of the process it comes into. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. When one thing that I noticed, or it occurred to me when I was spending a little bit more time in the pharma arena, was how much I think each side could learn from the other, how much
Yeah.
MDM can learn from the pharma and vice versa. We seem to be equally advanced in certain areas and equally not advanced in other areas, and they kind of seem yin and yang to each other. So I think that there could be some good conversations that maybe Oliver could ultimately bring to both
Mhm.
industries, if you will, and be a
Mhm.
conduit of information exchange. There's the likelihood of individuals within each company or working within the pharmaceuticals are the MDMs, switching over is not super high, but having that conduit through a supplier with that voice would be, I think, more than welcome,
Jen, what
so
do you,
that we can
so
learn from each other.
you've studied them both, and I'm really interested for your opinion on, where med device is really strong that you think pharmaceutical and drug delivery could really learn from them. What's one spot you think as you studied them both?
Honestly, packaging in general, the part that has always struck me since I started learning is that in certain areas of the pharmaceutical supply chain, value
Mhm.
chain, um, what we would call packaging in the medical device industry, they don't think of as packaging. So it's those pre-filled syringe tubs,
Mm.
it's the component bags, right? And so they don't have packaging people working on that part of
Yeah.
their process typically because they don't consider it packaging. They haven't necessarily always heard of 11607. It's a
Yeah.
document that could, very well benefit them if they use it. Um, and they don't have packaging people taking care of it, and so there's a big lack of information as to how to manage this packaging. I don't know if you've seen that from your
Mm.
selling into that part of the market. It's not that they don't want to know, they just don't know that the information is out there.
It's a very interesting insight. So it's the rigor on packaging and the technical specifics of it are a little stronger on the med device side, as you said, because of 11607, all the FDA auditing rounds over the last 2 decades, right? They've really zoned in on quality and what is
Right.
packaging.
Well, in the
Oh,
packaging that we do in the MDM
yeah,
side, that is intended for the end user, right? And so it
yeah.
is critical to point of use. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in the pharmaceutical process and value chain that that packaging isn't important. It's very
Hmm.
important because it is terminally sterile to the next step,
Yeah.
right? Because it's often the component suppliers that are packaging it and shipping it to their customers.
Hmm.
So it needs to be terminally sterile. And some of the requirements are even more stringent than what we have in med device for pharmaceuticals. Um, so I think that there would be an interesting conversation to be had there between the two industries, and where we could help.
What's fascinating about that is the speed of pharmaceutical and the rigor and the quality of med device, and you put them together, and isn't that in a way what we're going to be facing with COVID vaccines
Yes.
coming up,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we look back on COVID PPE, COVID test kits, and the rush to fill that need, but make sure we don't have quality problems. And now we're going to have an even bigger challenge ahead of us in the next couple of years with a vaccine that
Right.
the whole world is going to need. We're going to have to produce it fast, but have to make sure it's of the highest quality. We can't risk quality issues with this one because
Exactly.
every life depends on it in a way.
Oh, exactly. I mean, when you hear the pharmaceutical component manufacturers talk about how certain things can cause millions of dollars of product to be scrapped just like that,
Hmm.
it kind of blows your mind because that's really outside of typically from a manufacturing standpoint, right? Outside of the what you would typically see in an MDM.
Yeah,
From an MDM standpoint, you typically don't see that type of impact until it's out in the field. You
yeah.
don't typically catch that internally, but they do catch it, thank God, internally as part of their processing typically. I mean, those are broad strokes of my brush. But when you hear customers talk about it in that respect, it's kind of impactful,
Hmm.
because that it could be you that it's used on, just like med device, right?
Yeah.
But again, from a pharmaceutical standpoint, when they're making a batch of something, it could be thousands of people impacted
Hmm.
just from one batch.
from one bag, right? From one batch. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's a good reminder of the impact of the
Yeah,
product we're working on.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's definitely things that the MDM side can learn from the pharmaceutical side too. But that's probably the big one that
Hmm.
has stuck out to me is where we could have some cross pollination going on. But
Yeah.
you bring up a good point in COVID and its implications, and that's kind of a good segue into our next topic, and that is COVID and the implications for packaging. Um, Tell me more about what you guys have seen in the last few months. I mean, this has really jerked the value chain around quite a bit, all around.
Yeah. Uh, the implications are really, really amazing to think about how it's kind of rocked the world and the medical world, right? Where we think about where we were
Hmm.
at the beginning of the year, how we've worked our way through it. I also find it fascinating to look at on a global perspective, right? How our team in China and APAC regions have kind of dealt with the COVID implications all the way through the European wave, and how we're still dealing with it here in the Americas. And the fight's not over, right? So there's still
No.
more challenges and implications to come. But as I reflected on it before our discussion, I was thinking about how in the very beginning, a lot of it was around PPE. You'd see the news headlines of scrambling to acquire PPE here in the States, other nations looking to produce it and kind of make sure their hospitals were well stocked before sharing it. So it's like the ideas of global trade kind of shifting a little bit as we needed to get masks and safety equipment to every hospital, and that impacts packaging, right?
Hmm.
There's a couple scenarios where PPE was needed and fresh PPE couldn't be produced and delivered in time, so suddenly it became, can we sterilize it, right? Could we
Yeah.
sterilize PPE and reuse it, and what's the packaging needed to perform that operation? So that was a very unique challenge we didn't foresee at the beginning of this, that we kind of had to react to. And then it's sort of shifted into testing kits and the
Hmm.
diagnostic kits for nasal swabs and throat swabs. Suddenly swabs are in a shortage, and the country needs more swabs, the world needs more swabs. Well, that means it also needs more packaging. And I
And
think that's
well,
a
and
go
in
ahead.
conversation when we were preparing for this, we talked about the concept that packaging is being asked to do things that it's never been asked to do before. When you
That's
talk
right.
about PPE and test kits, right? I mean, typically you go into a doctor's office and get tested there. They've been able to
Hmm.
handle and manage all of their inventory in a pretty controlled. Now you have
Yeah.
right
Yep.
where
Under a
things
tent.
are
Yep.
under a
Yep.
tent. There's their supplies are sitting in a hot trunk in a car.
Hmm.
They're being shoved in more pockets. Is there potential for cross contamination? There's so many big questions that come up, and what can packaging do to help um, maintain the integrity of that whole process that's been removed from a more staid environment.
And just the sheer amount of false positives you might be driving, right? Of,
Right.
if the integrity of the packaging is broken because of all those challenges you just described, now suddenly somebody's being diagnosed and it's, uh-oh, do I need to call out of work for the next couple of weeks? Am I worried I've got this life-threatening virus, right? And it just causes trust issues with the diagnosis. Suddenly I need to go get a second or a third test, and these are just all things that packaging is being challenged with, and we have to continue to rise to that occasion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think of the tightest, the hardest COVID challenges we faced. I was really proud to see the people of Oliver drop everything to attack this charge. I mean, we were between sites just so we could produce face shields for an organization in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that needed
Yeah.
them overnight. And our team drove halfway to meet another truck and exchange the material. And it's like, let's get that produced in a day, because
Yeah.
that's what the customer needed. And I was really proud to tell that story on behalf of the company. But also the way we've attacked some of those design challenges of folks who needed swabs and weren't quite sure how to protect them because they're going to get shipped all over the place, and we need them really fast in high quantities, and the team could rise to the occasion and fight that. So it's, I think, been through a very scary year, also kind of inspiring to be a part of the fight against COVID. And if you can
Absolutely.
relate what we do in packaging to a patient outcome, then you should feel like you're part of that fight.
I completely agree. And I mean, we were at the upper end of the value chain and the tail wagging a little bit.
Yeah.
So we did as much as we could as well in and we still are in trying to get those needs responded to as quickly as possible. So it is, I think it's been invigorating to see the entire industry rally together and do what needs to be done. And know that the people doing it are your friends,
Mm,
which is kind of a special part of industry in general, is that um, you're not just doing it for those end users, you're doing it for your friend at Oliver, for your friend at any of the MDMs that need the help. And I think that really has helped build the community a lot as well. So
absolutely.
there I am going off topic a little bit, but so
It's a good topic. It's a good
it is a
topic.
good topic. Yeah. I mean, that could be a whole conversation in of itself, is the strength that we have within our community, and how it just really transcends typical business practice. So one of my next questions, and second to last, is how do you think the packaging industry is going to be asked to do what it does better, different,
Yeah.
however, into the future, both based on, coronavirus and what it's teaching us, as well as potentially how medical devices are changing in and of themselves.
It's it's a really great question because think of even just 12 months ago what we thought the challenges for packaging probably would be, and then something like COVID hits, and suddenly it gives us a new lens on everything of what right now packaging's challenge is scale.
Yeah.
Can we get to the volume needed for all these swabs, all these kits, billions of vaccines, right? So everyone's talking about a vaccine that can work. Suddenly we're realizing, wow, we need our glass to do syringes. And pretty soon it's, boy, we're going to need a lot of material to do packaging because every one of those is going to need to be safely transported or else it doesn't work. So
Hmm.
the stakes are higher, and scale has kind of become the challenge of the year, if you will. But even thinking beyond that, maybe into a post-COVID world, packaging, I think, really is just going to continue to evolve greatly in the medical space. So in the
Well, I
retail
mean,
world,
when you talk
oh,
about how COVID is going to change things, I think that it might
yeah,
accelerate the home use
yes,
scenario and driving more things away from in hospital or even in clinic
yep,
settings. And so individuals as patients, you, me, all of our friends, all of our family, are going to do something different to do before. Maybe we might be doing strep tests at home instead of having to go to an office. Whoa, wow, how does that change things?
yeah, self-administered tests. I look at the rise in telehealth this year
Hmm.
as a great proof point. In China, the spike in internet hospitals, right? So it's a hospital, it's a suite of caregivers, but without a physical infrastructure behind them, just doing telehealth and reaching diagnosis and maybe even mailing you the kit, the test or the drug to administer to yourself. So absolutely, that's what I mean about scale and the challenges of, we are designing for end use in an operating room, but soon it could be the end use of your living room,
Yeah.
and clear, easy instructions so that somebody with rheumatoid arthritis could, open that package without it, exploding all over the house. So I just think those design challenges are going to continue to get harder. And it just means have to have more empathy for
Hmm.
our caregivers, for our patients. We got to really understand what their scenario is like. If it's a chaotic emergency room and you've designed a packaging kit that's got 27 parts to it, great, maybe you saved a couple bucks or, you reduced your spend, but you just made life a lot harder perhaps for a caregiver who's trying to, administer care to somebody who's dying. So
Right.
I think those packaging challenges are going to continue to evolve on us, and that's part of the interesting part of working in medical, because in the retail world, packaging is very much about appeal and
Yeah.
consumerism, right? It's your shelf, it's what people see when they walk the aisles, and you're just trying to make it look like attractive and somebody wants to buy it. But
Right.
boy, in the medical world, it's about use, right? Can it do its job? Can it protect the life inside of that thing so that that person's going to live, a few more years?
Yeah.
And that's a great, I think, the great future ahead for packaging, really.
I completely agree with that. One of the things that I say when I meet with students at different colleges is that there's nothing sexy about medical device packaging, right? You can't go to the store with your friends and point it out on the shelf and say, I designed that. Aren't you proud of me? How cool is that? I won an
Yeah.
award for this. Because you can't go to the OR or even the ER and point out things
Mm,
that you have designed, but you know in your heart that you have done something that is helping mankind, and that's where the sexy comes in. That's where the appeal comes in.
sure. If you visit an Oliver location, when you walk into the lobby, you'll see a photo mural of our pouches with pictures inside. And part of that is because we wanted our employees to realize we're not just producing pouches. We're not just
Hmm.
producing lids, mounting cards, right? We're producing things that eventually a device is going to go inside or a drug is going to go inside. And that thing that's inside will extend someone's life or maybe
Yeah,
save their life. Could be a pacemaker inside that's going to give, a grandmother another 20 years with her family.
yeah,
Or it could
yeah.
be a hip implant who gives somebody a whole new look on life, who previously was very immobile and in a lot of pain. So we asked every employee to think about, is there a friend or a family member of yours who's had surgery, had a device, had a drug that has extended their life? Start picturing them inside the pouches, right?
Hmm.
Because that'll give us some empathy for what our customers are doing. Your mission statements are really ours. And that should be how we connect to the outcome of medical packaging. Yeah, you're right. It's not as sexy as what you might see in the grocery store, but it's got a lot more impact than a box of cereal.
I'm so glad that you just um, succinctly put that statement, because it's been something that's been in me since day one of
Hmm.
stepping foot onto a medical device company. And I don't know that the medical device industry is as good as it used to be about sharing that message
Mm.
with their employees, especially incoming. I think that there's a lot of uh, you forget what you didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And so I think medical device companies have forgotten that they didn't know at one point, or they had to enforce with their employees that everything they do, every decision that they make is ultimately for that patient that's going to receive the value of that device that's inside.
Mm.
And hopefully, we can, through conversations like this,
Hmm.
and sharing with especially the younger generation coming in right now, because there's a large swath coming in. We kind of have two
Yeah.
distribution. It's the bimodal distribution, right? There's those of us that have been in the industry 20 plus years, and then there's like 10 minus. There's in between, but there's a lot of younger people coming in right now, and that's one of the messages that I've seen kind of getting lost in translation a little bit. So I'm glad that you brought that part up. So it's time for our last question, Steve.
Sure.
The I don't know what the word is. Is it penultimate? Whatever. I don't know what the word is. Anyway, can you tell me about the challenges that Oliver has faced in the last 6 months through the coronavirus, and any existing issues that have been exacerbated by this pandemic?
Geez. Challenges
You
over the
kind of
last six
touched
months?
on them a little bit.
Yeah.
It's been a piece of cake
Has
walking in the
it
park,
has
right?
it been a challenging 6 months? Oh, okay. No, it's a great question to reflect on a little bit. I think when it first hit, our immediate thought, the entire leadership team, really everyone in the company, was keeping our employees safe first and foremost, right? It
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
started with that. We weren't even going to think about any other issue until we could think about the safety of our team. And being part of that supply chain, we recognize we're also critical. So the idea of just kind of closing up shop isn't an option, because the industry depends on us
Yeah.
for packaging, for keeping things safe. So the immediate focus and the hardest challenge was, we got to get this right. We got to keep our people safe. And I think we've had a pretty good track record at that. So I tip my cap to our safety team, and operations team, who went all out to keep our manufacturing sites safe, and also to our administrative employees who suddenly, within a day, were working from home for the next 6 months and didn't know it. So now you're struggling to build a home office, stay productive, stay responsive to customer needs, while juggling at home schooling, right? And I have three young
Yeah.
ones in school, right? So it's just, I think of all the challenges, on the personal side, met the professional side this year, and I'm just really proud of the team at Oliver for how we've attack that and overcome that and continue to produce. So moving past that and then into the industry challenges.
Yeah, well,
The thing we probably didn't anticipate is, at least in the Americas, and other regions felt this too, is elective surgeries, right? So as elective surgeries stopped really in March, because
completely other than emergencies, right? I mean, like completely.
So trauma still was there, right? Life's threatening, but anything considered elective that could be put off for a little bit longer was, and hospitals just really stopped their consumption of devices and supplies if it wasn't related to COVID. And that impacts everybody, right? So we know that impacts our customers who suddenly stop production themselves. They stop ordering packaging. That has effects on us. So, we went through a bit of a slowdown there as we try to react to all these electives. Now, as those are turning back on, hospitals are starting to do electives again. They're starting to catch up. They're not back to 100%, but it becomes almost like a forecasting in demand. If you think of a spigot being abruptly shut off, slowly turned back on, what we're trying to watch for is if there's a rush and suddenly elective surgeries open right back up, that spigot gets opened up full, we've got to stay responsive to that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's likely to happen, Steve, because we're learning how to manage prevention of coronavirus, and that will allow us to do a lot more normal life activities, including elective surgeries, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So we're anticipating, we're doing our best to, stock up where we can or work with customers who have some line of sight to their demand, and just, it's about staying nimble. This is where we're going to learn a lot from our new acquisition. They're incredibly nimble, right? And they can produce, really with days notice. And we're going to learn a lot from them to become more nimbler on our side because the industry demands it. We recognize nobody wants to be put in a bind. Nobody wants to give their supplier short notice. You're doing it because you have no other choice. And in those situations, we've got to rise to the occasion. We're confident we can do that.
It's really exciting what you guys have going on at Oliver. I appreciate the time that you gave me today. Any last parting comments that you want to share with people?
No, I'm really jealous of your background, though. You've inspired me to bring in some artwork from home.
I thought you were talking about my professional background.
Well, that too. I'll say both. Jen. So just getting to chat with you about all of the learning you've had between med device and pharma has been really helpful to see how the two connect. You've definitely helped me expand my thinking there through these conversations. And then, as I look at your home office, I'm like, oh, geez, I gotta spruce things up because I like the artwork. That's really well done.
Thank you. I'll let my kids know.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Take care.